and this faith journey has produced is peace and joy. And so, God, we enter your gates today with thanksgiving. We are thanking you that we are growing up in faith. We are thanking you that we are becoming and beholding and becoming changed for the time we have spent in your presence.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of Midday Manna. I am your host, and if you don't know, my name is Lenore Reynolds Jones. I consider it a privilege and a pleasure to be able to share this manna with you today. If you've been tracking with me, of course, this always happens. You know, there's the moment that you thought that you have put your phone on do not disturb, and then that's the moment you get a text message. But hey, that's what happens on live, right? You see it, and then I deal with it. But as I was saying, I am Lenore Reynolds Jones. I am the host of this here show, but I am also the founder of a wonderful company called Legacy Builders, where I help individuals gain necessary tools and skills to leave a lasting legacy. I know you're like, wait, what does that mean? That sounds great. Use smaller words, different words. I help people figure out their identity. I help you to look at who you were told you should be, what society has superimposed, what even family has superimposed. And I give you tools, things like a Hebrew Greek name analysis, where I believe written in your name is clues to not just who you are, but your purpose. And so I give you all these tools and skills to help you figure out clearly who you are, why you are here, and what you were uniquely gifted to do, be it as a single individual or as a married couple, because I believe those things are concentric circles where if you're good in you as a whole individual, then that flows outwards in your marriage, and from your marriage to your extended family, and from your family to your community, and so on and so forth. And next thing you know, you're impacting the world just by showing up as your authentic self. So that's enough about me and what I do. This show, however, is Midday Manna. It is Midday Manna because I absolutely believe that manna is provision for a season. And if you've been tracking with me, what has happened is that we have actually gone through a good portion of scripture, but we are back, in the book of Jericho. And you know what happened on Monday? If you have not caught, and so this is a shameless plug, if you did not know, I now go live on Mondays. It's only for about 10 minutes. It's called Monday Motivation. It's still at the 12 o'clock hour, but it's at the end of the 12 o'clock. So instead of right at noon, now it's about 12:50, between 12:50 and 1 o'clock. Right there, I go live for about 10 minutes and I give you a word of motivation. And this past Monday, we were in, and if you wanted to know what I'm in the Bible. That's what I am. But we were in the book of Joshua, and our motivation came from Joshua chapter 5, verse 12. And I'll read it for you. Joshua chapter 5, verse 12 says, "Then the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the produce of the land, and the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year." That's in the, let me tell you, New King James Version. I want you to hear it now, and this is just the way it is, and this is where we're starting. I want you to hear it in the next translation I'm reading is the New Messianic Translation, and you're like, girl, what? Try it. It's the NMV, right? So New Messianic Version. That one says, Joshua chapter 5. Verse. I'm in the right thing. How? Why isn't this the one? Oh, because it's not Joshua. That was Judges. I'm like, that can't be right. Verse 12. Here we go. And it says, Joshua chapter 5, verse 12 in the NMV says, "And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten the old corn of the land, Neither had the people of Israel manna anymore, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. And in that, on Monday, manna has stopped. The day after they ate the food, the old corn of Canaan, no more manna fell. And so and we're going straight now that I've told you about midday manna, because literally, midday manna is this thing where, for me, it's proof that manna falls while you are in transition, but when you get where you're going, God does something new. And so that is where we pick up today. We pick up today with a group of people who are now like, I can only imagine. Number one, I don't think they thought that eating the fruit of the land would mean that manna would stop. Can you imagine that? Like, however long this journey, it's supposed to be an 11-day journey, but understand, like, we got through the part where we saw when the parents made the poor decision, and many of these children have come into their entire life because 40 years have passed. And so their 40 years, they've been every day morning, they go gather their manna and then they eat and they do whatever. 40 consecutive years of every day you get up, you go outside and you just pick up your food off the ground. And then the day that you do it, in terms of you ate the fruit of the land, the old corn, the next day you went outside to pick up manna, and the manna is like, who are you looking for? I'm not here. And the Bible doesn't say that God made an announcement. It just says there's no more manna. And I think many of us are like that we did something, we made a decision, we benefited, and we didn't understand in the moment what would be the consequence or the result of our choice. So I need you to understand that, yes, you are in the promised land, but expect the manna to dry up. The way that you receive from God, the way the provision happened before, it's not going to happen that way again. And don't be surprised. It's not a bad thing, because look, what did they eat? They ate old corn, as in, and I talked about this a little bit on Monday, they ate what someone else had cultivated. That corn could only be there because the Canaanites planted it and, watered it and did all the work. So they're eating a provision that someone else worked for. And so when you sit here, and I'm not saying that, that's going to be your story, but I want you to know that in the promised land, a part of it is being able to understand that you don't have to do everything. In manna, yes, the manna was coming down from heaven all the time, and the manna was always there, but we understood you didn't eat if you didn't go outside and pick it up. With this new promised land, the food was there. All the hard work had already been done. They just had to eat. They just had to consume it. And so I want you to understand that with this new level, with this new promised land, new skills are required. Because I am certain that if it's old corn, they didn't eat and prepare the old corn the same way they did with the manna. So I need you to also update now your expectations. Don't expect God to move the same way now that you're in the promised land that he did when you weren't. We often, and I posted this verse on Monday actually, about behold, I do a new thing. And why I posted it again is that this idea that we think God does new things one off, as if, okay, he's going to do this new thing now, and then everything is going to go back to normal. No, God is doing new things perpetually. That's why there are so many one-off stories in the Bible. And that's why, you share your testimony to encourage someone to believe God, but you don't share it in an expectation as I don't know, a blueprint of how God is going to move. God is not predictable. What is predictable is that he will be different. It's that it's going to be new. So just because God did it this way for the last how many ever years for this amount of people, don't stick it in there and put it in your program and this is your box. 1 + 1 = 2. No, 1 + 1 = 1. Or 1 + 1 = 3. Or 1 + 1 + 1 = 1. Because that's God. There's the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and they are one. But what I'm saying is that the only predictable thing about God is that he is unpredictable. And I'm going to pause here and say something that I said to my husband, and you will see me a couple of different places. One of the places you may see me is on a Friday night cafe. And this past Friday, I said something, and my husband actually pulled me aside days later and followed up like, pause, babe. You said something, and I need to make sure I understand what you said. One of the things I said was that God, and you guys have heard me talk about, I believe that God is absolutely permissive. Like, you want to do it, go ahead. The answer is yes, unless it has to be no. And it has to be no, not no. Because if he can figure it out, it's not going to be no. So I believe the answer is yes, unless it has to be no. But God is permissive. So you're like, God, I want to do this. God's like, okay, go ahead. I want to do this. Go ahead. I want to do that. Go ahead. And you're like, well, God, which one? And he's like, why, which one? Do them all. Right? So I believe God is permissive. But what I said Friday night was that God only ever gave us 10 absolutes. There are only 10 absolutes. And everything else that God told us and showed us, he related through story. And so he was like, the question my husband was, what are the absolutes? What were you talking about when you said God only ever gave us 10 absolutes? Guys, and I didn't even realize I was saying something, amazing or anything like that. But the 10 absolutes I was referring to was the 10 commandments. They're the only place in scripture where God was just straight up like, don't do don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, and here's why. Don't do it, and here's why. Don't do it, and here's why. Don't do this, and don't. And yes, if we break them down, we can break, if you're really, really, really well churched, they'll tell you, like, if you break down the 10 commandments, they can come down to 2, like love God and love your fellow man and all of that great stuff. But literally, there are only pretty much 10 absolutes. Don't have no other gods before me. Why? Because I'm a jealous guy. Period. That's an absolute. There's no way around it. And then we see all the stories about the people who try to do this and it didn't work out. And it didn't work out because it was one of God's absolutes. But what I want you to hear me say is that now that we arrived at like the Jericho, at the promised land, what I want you to understand is the only thing, there are only 10 absolutes. So when you're looking at God to move, if it's not one of the absolutes, what are we waiting for? Because here's the thing, the beauty and grace of God is that with each absolute, he told you why. God is not out here like intentionally leaving you in the dark. He ain't intentionally not speaking. He's not intentionally, gonna leave you with a bunch of questions. He's too good for that. He's too gracious for that. And yes, we hear all the wonderful things like, oh, the teacher is quiet during the test. But the reality is he had been teaching you the whole time. So by the time he gets quiet, you knew a test was coming. So we have now these children of Israel. They are in the promised land. The manna has stopped. That is right where we are. The manna has stopped. They go in, and last Wednesday we talked about Jericho and what it meant for, the walls of Jericho and what the Jericho experience looked like, where they came in, they walked in silence for 6 days. And what I told you last week was many of you have been walking in silence around something. You've been circling this thing in prayer. You've been circling it physically. You've been holding on to this promise. You're going and you're going and you're going. And what I told you last Friday was that, this was your announcement. This was your moment. This was your day 7. This was last Wednesday. That this was your moment to shout and watch the walls come down, but also understand, you stand back, you let the walls come down, but these walls coming down, they also represented access, because the walls fell in such a way that the broken walls became the stairs into the city. So we talked about that. And I think we unpacked it really good. And so now we have the people who no longer getting manna. And these are the same people now who go and it was after the manna that they went and fought Jericho. So they fought Jericho on new provision. Because verse 12 happens, and then it was in verse 13 that, he got the instructions from God to go fight Jericho. So the manna stops in chapter 5, and the destruction of Jericho is in chapter 6. So the battle, that very first battle, it was fought on new provision. Right? Look, I'm just following along with the scripture here. I'm not doing no deep dive. I'm not, I have done research and commentary, but at this point, we aren't even entertaining any of that. We're literally just going with the chronology of what is revealed as it's laid out. I'm not arguing about what happened first. We're not doing that. So literally, they got this new provision. They got these directives from God about what they were going to do, about, the things and I'm trying to find the word where God tells them, destroy it. He has set something aside for destruction. So they go in, they do what they're supposed to do at Jericho, and then they are hype. We got the walls down. We beat Jericho. Jericho is a mess. Joshua kept his word to Rahab and her family. All of that's happening. And then verse 7 says, but. And I'm and it's a capital B. And if you have one of those Bibles that they give you topics or headings for your chapters, chapter 6 says the destruction of Jericho, and chapter 7 says the defeat at Ai. So, and I'm wait, what? Because one of the things I attempted to study in preparation for today was how much time had passed. Nothing really says how much time had passed. So it looks to me like it was a couple, probably. So I'm going to take prophetic license and say it's probably a couple of days. They went in, they had taken the 7 days and did what they had to do. After they got Jericho, they routed it, they won, they got everything, they destroyed everything. They collected what God said they could collect. They destroyed everything that they couldn't, and they were ready. And now it was on to the next. And the very next was Ai. It is interesting to note that Ai is smaller than Jericho. So if anything, they went in there oh, we done killed Jericho. We good for this. Let's go in here and just take care of this real quick and move on. And as I sat there, I thought about, if last week we were at this place where this is your Jericho and the walls have come down. This week we are at Ai. And the caution here is they faced defeat here because of the disobedience of one person, Achan. He had the things, the set aside things. He snuck it in. He hid it. He literally the entire chapter, verse 6 is high. Verse 7 is high. And they like went in there, and for me, it's the not just the sin of the individual, but the pride of the people. Because they went in there, and what I want you to see is they went in there and they expected to just do what they had done before. And rewind this, 5 minutes ago, to where I said that God is always doing a new thing. Always. The predictableness of God is that he is unpredictable. So he is perpetually doing something new. And so they came into this and they were ready to do what they had done at Jericho. God had utterly devoted this place to destruction. Here comes this guy, and I'm not going to do what God said. This is just too good. I'm going to save this for the house. God didn't ask him to do that. God don't need your help. He ain't looking for no favors from you. He is the source. If he needed gold, he would have made it himself. All of this is true, and this guy does that. But more than that, it's the attitude of the people who they went in there and they had started believing their own press. Because of what they had seen God do at Jericho, they went into Ai ready, and they got themselves whooped up one side and down the next. And so my caution to you today is, number one, one of the things I do, and I'm not saying this to make my sound better in any way, but it's just the reality of how God made me, really. But one of the things, even today before this broadcast and every broadcast, I get on here and I'm like, God, I'm a mess. So anything that you're going to say or anything that's going to be good, you're going to have to say it through me and to me. Because I don't come on with this idea that I am somehow better than any of you, that I am more knowledgeable than any of you. We say that the ground is level at the foot of the cross, and then we start elevating people. Please don't elevate me. Let God, if there is any elevation to be had on the North part, I want God to do it. And that way, it has nothing to do with me and everything to do with him, and he gets all the glory. Take me out of it the way, and whatever good stuff you get out of this, it's all God. There's no Lenore here. Every good string of words that I put together, every time I say something that you totally identify with, anything that I have said, let us be clear that this is Jesus's show. This is Jesus's show. This is Jesus's manna. I may be the vessel through which the manna comes. So you came and you picked it up, and he may have put the manna here, and I'm just the thing he's carrying it around it. But I'm not the manna. The manna that I give to you is Jesus. And so when we look at Achan, somewhere along the way, he got confused about what he could do and what he couldn't do and what God needed from him. And so what I'm telling you is, and think about how early in the conquering of the promised land this happened. This was battle 2. Battle 1 was Jericho. Battle 2 was Ai. Battle 3 was Ai. So what I'm telling you is, you're gonna get in here and you're gonna see some good things start happening. As soon as the good things start happening, don't think, oh, I deserve this. Don't think, oh, finally, God. Don't let pride creep in. Don't think too highly of yourself than you ought. Don't go back to bad habits and try to help God. He still doesn't need your help. He got you here. He'll get you there. Do what God said to do and give God the glory and the praise. This is not one of the biggest lessons I've learned, even as I go through these stories, even as I live my life, is that Either we believe the Bible, and to the point where we believe that we are living our lives as testimonies to either prove or disprove that our God is who he says he is. And the reality is, every one of these battles, every one of these things that we encounter, either you're proving or you're disproving that God is who he says he is. Either he's as powerful, either he's as strong, either he's as good, either he's as gracious, or it is what the enemy has said. And in those moments where we insert ourselves, we actually block God's ability. Because literally that is what happened. It wasn't that God was not strong enough to help the people, even as they went in there thinking, oh, we got this. Even with all of that, it wasn't that any of that that God couldn't still, defeat them. Because in the third battle, what God did was use less people to defeat Ai. God ended up using less people to do what he could have used more people to do. But what happened was they had blocked God's ability. Because the truth is, God's not pushy. He's not going to force himself where he let it. So he told them, this is what I want you to do. And he told every single person. And so this is why I want you to hear and understand me. That this is why you are so powerful, because we serve a God who is so gracious, so merciful, so kind, that he will only go as far as you allow him. And so, yes, you are in the promised land. Yes, you have access and you have defeated Jericho. But when you get to Ai, you only win if you let God fight. Yeah, that part. He's not going to force it. You only win if you let God fight. God doesn't need your help. Ai was literally, this guy was like, and again, he thought, and we've been through this back when we went through the story of Saul, where he was doing the wrong thing for the right reason. It's still the wrong thing, because this guy was like, I know God said don't keep nothing, but I was keeping. Wrong thing, right reason, quote unquote, but still wrong thing. And so we're back, and can you guys see? The stories are the same. The things that we face are the same. We get here, and then it's still. So my encouragement, my admonition to you is to continue to examine yourself, because in chapter 6, they were high. They were turned up, as we would say, from this victory at Jericho. In chapter 7, they faced defeat of their own making. Because yes, Achan, he did it by himself, but did he do it by himself? I'm gonna just set this right here, right, and I'm gonna put it back. He did it by himself, because he literally said, and here's, and I've talked to you about the grace of God, but here's just the last thing I want to say, because I am going to, get off. I'm not on here for more than about 30 minutes or so. But one of the things that really struck me was they lost. And remember, I just told you that, you have to let God fight. Joshua took the loss personally. Think about it. So think about all the wonderful things we've said about, Joshua, and how he fears from God, and how he this and that and that. And when they lost, Joshua took it personal. Joshua was acting like he lost, like he was more hurt than God. And so when he did that, he goes and he tore his clothes and he fell on the earth before the Lord. And he's like, why you brought us over here? And Joshua actually for a minute sounded like the crazy people from 40 years ago. And then God, and I'm going to say God bawled him out. But, God said to him, get up, and why are you on your face? When Israel has sinned. And so what, and I think about that God isn't asking you to be perfect. He isn't asking you to like, think about it. Joshua, like you wanted the job. You didn't get it. You acting like God, like, oh, you taking it all personal. Like, oh, God done embarrassed me. I done told everybody this was the job and God was gonna move. And God's like, get up. There is sin here. There is sin here. Like, so God isn't out to embarrass you. So here's a key skill that we need to take into the promised land experience with us. When it doesn't work, examine yourselves before you take your loss personal and cry and like disparage God, I think is the best way to say it. Because again, we learned 2 months ago that your words have power. We learned that. And so these words now, when it doesn't work, watch your words. Don't fall back into the trap that got that other generation kicked, that they never made it in. Because literally that's exactly, it's like Joshua clean forgot that he was one of the spies and he had to stand up when they were like, oh, maybe God brought it. Like Joshua acted just like that. He took the loss personal. If God is fighting, the losses are his. Yes, he's going to do it for you. But if the glory is his, the defeat is his too. And our Bible says that God is victorious. So is it really an L? Is it really a loss? Or is it him working all things together for your good? Camilla, this is true. But see, and so I will say this about this comment, and then again, I'm leaving for real, guys. But the one thing I want to say is this only, to a certain degree, this only happens when you're doing it with pride. To a large degree, I'm going to say. Because here's the thing. I think about myself quite often, and I'll be transparent. I was this person. I would pray, and like if I didn't see the results, like right this, I was like, God, why you have me out here praying? Why you have me out here and literally just like God checked Joshua, God checked me like, when did your name become Jesus Jr.? When did you get my perspective? When did you start working things out for yourself and for the people that I have called you to intercede from? Until you have my playbook, my perspective, my power, don't come for me. Don't talk to me in that tone of voice. Because here's the thing. God's always playing the long game. Woo! And that's the word. I'll tell you why I just got excited. Because when we see an L, Camilla, let's go back to this one. What if the L isn't lost, it's long? right? Because you're here and we're at this moment and they lost. They lost. But what if it wasn't a loss? Because after this, they never did this again. God was playing the long game and they were focused on the losses. Right? That's folks, I think we done got the point of today. Don't count losses when God is playing the long game. Jericho Ai. Come on, Camilla, help me. She says the L is not a loss as long as the victory in the long run. Like you worried about the fact that you didn't get this job, but God knows that He needs you to get this other job because in the long run, it's going to work out better for you. In God's timing, this means the long game. All right, I think it's this way because y'all can see it better. This is the long game. This is not a loss. It's a long game. It's the end of the gameplay. And you know how we know that? Because the Bible clearly says God sees the end from the beginning. And so we out here playing for little losses when God's like, nah, I'm playing the long game. I see that in 6 months, in 6 years, in 2 years, that this is going to be better. So yeah, let's clean this out now. Let's address this now. Now that you're high off the victory, let's address this so that the rest of the battles, the rest of the things to come, that you don't mess it up. Let's address this now. Promised Land Training 101. When I say utterly destroy, don't leave nothing, this is what I mean. And what's crazy, and I won't call it crazy, but let's put this in perspective. So a couple of months ago, we talked about the idea of Saul, and this, for real, I'm done now. We talked about the idea of Saul and how Saul, again, was doing the right thing for the wrong reason. And Saul pretty much did the same thing as, Achan did. God had told him, I have set this apart for destruction or whatever. And Saul lost his anointing and he lost everything because when God told him to do that, he didn't. But understand, when we're thinking of Saul, Achan was hundreds of years before Saul. Because once Achan and that lesson was learned, God never had to deal with this again until he got to Saul. And Saul was the first king of Israel after they had gone through they had done taken the promised land, they had possessed the promised land. God had done amazing things. God had kept his promise to them multiple times over. And then they started looking around at what the others had. So what I want you to understand, God is surely playing the long game. Because once they learned this lesson, this was not something they had to deal with until pretty much the story was probably not passed down correctly. That's true. You probably wouldn't have liked that boss anyways. And you probably wouldn't have gotten the skills you needed. You probably wouldn't have met the right person. So the summation for today's midday manna is: number one, once you get to the promised land, remember who's fighting. Remember who is fighting. Don't take the losses personal, because while you are counting losses, God is playing the long game. I think that's a great place for us to end today. I wish you a wonderful day. I pray that your the latter half of your day is greater than your beginning. I hope that, you join me next week for another edition of Midday Manna. Again, I am live Wednesdays and Fridays right at noon, and then Mondays right around 12:50, 1 o'clock. I'll give you a 10-minute Monday motivation. If you want to learn more about me, work with me, you can go to www.legacybuilders.com. If you are a married couple, something I have said has struck you in, like, does she have anything for married couples? I sure do. Go to this website right here, www.workwithlegacybuilders. There we will go through, you get a free case study about, I think, the top 3 most important things in marriage and how those things will help your marriage leave a lasting legacy. Otherwise, it will be my pleasure to see you again on Friday at noon. Before I go, I'm going to ask you one last time to like this broadcast, to share this broadcast, to subscribe to this broadcast on YouTube. Other than that, be blessed, and thank you so much for joining me again for another edition of Midday Manna.
And this faith journey has produced is peace and joy. And so, God, we enter your gates today with thanksgiving. We are thanking you that we are growing up in faith. We are thanking you that we are becoming and beholding and becoming changed for the time we have spent in your presence.